Welcome to the Embodiment podcast. This show is for you if you see the body as more than a brain taxi. It's for people interested in coming home to the body as a holistic aspect of who we are and how we live. Episodes contain practical tips, exercises you can take away, and interviews with specialists from around the world. I'm your host for today, Mark Walsh. On the show today, Ginny Whitelaw. So Ginny is a very senior embodiment teacher. I years ago looked at her book, Move to Greatness, and I've got other ones of her books like Zen Leader. She comes from a background working in NASA. She's a aikido black belt, bona fide Zen master, works with all kinds of corporates. And she's got a new book coming out. So I'd take the opportunity to get her on. So Ginny, it's really nice to get you on the show.
Yeah, thank you, Mark. Thanks for making time for this.
Let's start at the beginning. What was your journey with embodiment? How did it start?
I think I always had a fascination with energy. Wanted to understand how energy worked in the human being. I was a physicist by training. I went into biophysics in graduate school. But in a very practical sense, probably coming out of taking night classes in college where women were attacked on our campus, I started in martial arts when I was 19 years old. And I was a really sickly kid. I mean, I had asthma growing up, and it was a huge breakthrough for me to start to learn how to breathe and use my body. It was something I could never take for granted. And by the time I got to college and graduate school, it became a daily practice. And you know how this works, Mark. The more you drop into the body, the more whole things become. And of course, aikido and led to Zen. And the form of Zen that I train in and now teach is a deeply physical, embodied form of Zen. It is truly using the body to train the mind, with the result that embodiment has been for me a lifelong practice, or at least since I was 19.
Wow. So this was in the States, I guess.
Yeah, it was in the States, though I've had teachers from other places, but my training was in the States in graduate school at Chicago under the incredible Aikido teacher Fumio Toyota. And He was also a Zen guy. He led me to the remarkable Tonoi Roshi in Hawaii, who was one of the most, if not the most incredible human being I've ever met. Just so capable. And his words, his teaching deeply seared into me.
So, I mean, Japanese culture generally then sounds like it's been an influence between Zen and Aikido.
It has been, just as it's been, that's been one of the stepping stones into our culture in embodied practices, as so many of those arts, as like Aikido, Kendo, Kado, speak to a way for the human spirit, a way for the human being. And this has indeed become a way.
And tell us about NASA, because that's pretty sexy. That's a pretty cool thing to have on your CV. How did that happen?
Well, back when I was a sickly asthmatic kid, I also had a dream to be an astronaut, and for some reason saw no conflict between those two things. And yet, and I wrote NASA when I was quite young, when I was 13 years old. And I said, what classes should I take in junior high school to best prepare me for my life as an astronaut? And they actually wrote back. And What they wrote back was not a form letter. You might think it would be, but they actually wrote a real letter, because in the opening paragraph it said, well, it doesn't matter what you take in junior high school, when you're 13 years old. But they said, take science and math, and gave me a whole list of things I should major in, like physics or aeronautical engineering or astrophysics. And I put that letter on my wall. And it became a real lodestone for me. I did take every science and math class under the sun. By the time I was getting out of graduate school, I was now healthy enough to even conceive of this as a possibility. And a few months out of graduate school, NASA was accepting applicants. And by this time, they were actually allowing women in the program, which was not true when I was a kid.
Okay, that's a step up.
That's a step up. So I got my application in the next day, and they called me for an interview. And I went down there all excited about, now I'm going to get my dream. But I didn't get my dream. What I got was a huge learning. They initially said, you look kind of interesting. We don't want to make you an astronaut right now. You need operational experience. Come down here to the Johnson Space Center and learn how we do things. So that's what I did. And I went to Houston, Texas, and worked for NASA. It turned out when I got there, the space station was the big up-and-coming thing, and I worked on first the flight and ground data systems for the space station, and eventually became the deputy manager for integrating the space station.
Interesting. It's so cool that someone wrote you that letter.
It is. Someone took
some
the
hero
time.
took the time to do that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, to encourage you. And interestingly, there's an aikido guy from Britain who almost got on the British space program, almost became the first British person in space. And in the end, they declined him because of his aikido obsession, but he was down to the last 3 or something. This was Alex McGann. I hope I'm telling that story right. He's a fairly senior British aikidoka. But and there is this connection between people. I've seen this between people interested in space and people interested in martial arts. You know, Star Wars is very Zen and very Taoist. You know, there's Darth Vader in it doing his yoga breathing and dressed the sort of, lots of people, the Jedis are dressed like Buddhist monks almost, you know. There does seem to be this sort of strange geeky connection between martial arts and science fiction and interest in space.
You know, it's a great point. As I think back to what stimulated my own interest, it really was, you know, lying on the ground as a kid, looking up at the stars and imagining what's possible and dreaming big and dreaming large. And of course, at that time when I was growing up, the space program in the United States was a big thing. It was a big, exciting thing. Yeah. And they were the Jedi of our day. They were the heroes of our time.
Yeah. I feel sad that we've lost that. We've almost become too cynical, you know, to go into space. Or I'd love it if they tried to put a person on Mars, you know, like we need something big to dream around, because we were just in this sort of cynical infighting on the planet today. And I think having something transcendent, and it makes sense that someone that's interested in space is interested in inner space and is interested in, as you say, what is possible in the humanity, you know, in the same way as like Jedi, they're human, but they're not, you know, they're human, but they're special. They've got some extra powers, you know, and you can feel that way in Aikido or Zen or whatever, can't you? You can feel like, oh, I've leveled up as a human being here. I'm starting to go to the reaches of human potential.
Yes. And unlike in movies, it takes more than, 3 minutes.
Years of work to get anything that might look like even slightly a skill. Embarrassingly small skill gains in such long times. So you're essentially a manager at NASA, right? So they haven't sent you up in space. You're a manager. You're there. What's that like day to day? Give us a sense of, I'm imagining it's a pretty high pressure, high performance environment.
It was, in part because we were always redesigning the space station. And we never had enough money for our dreams, for everything we wanted to build. And we also had a very convoluted management structure for the program, not entirely NASA's fault. There were 4 space agencies collaborating on this. And nobody, strictly speaking, reported to anybody else. They all sort of reported to NASA, but
right.
If ESA didn't want to do things a certain way and their contractors wouldn't want to follow a certain standard, we couldn't force them to, or at least it could become so prohibitively expensive, it would not happen. And so even within NASA, the different NASA centers were always vying for this or that control. And that became for me something that just was gnawing on me, because I would go into these meetings of the Space Station Review Board, for example, and just watch people at each other's throat.
Yeah.
Arguing and pushing on people. And then I'd go to the dojo at night, and I was teaching Aikido and Zen at the time. I was running a dojo by night, and I would see people, and you've seen it too, Mark, become more resilient, more able to work with difficult others, more able to roll with the punches, literally. And then I'd go back to NASA, and I'd see them, the conflict and the fighting. And it really was gnawing on me to the point of saying, the deep training of the dojo could do a world of good at work.
So just to jump in, these are some of the smartest people in the world, right? They've got the book smarts, they've got the head smarts, they've got the degrees from good universities, and yet they're still bitching at each other in meetings, getting what we would call off center. And you're seeing that contrast with the dojo between the smartest people in the world who, can't run a meeting, and then a bunch of most dojos, fairly cross-section of society, sort of not exactly normal people, but, there might be a baker and a taxi driver or whatever doing this kind of graceful movement and harmonious resolution. Must have been quite a contrast.
Well, it was quite a contrast. And in the case of our dojo, since it was right in the NASA territory, a lot of the very same people that I'd see at meetings were the same people in the dojo. So it wasn't even like a radically different cross-section. It was a radically different context and a different sense of what's possible for the human being. And that's what I really wanted to bring to the world of work. That was what started changing my whole career direction, because up to this point I had been a scientist, a project manager, and working in a very technical way. But after this point, it became much more about leadership and teams and how to make them more effective and how to do that in a way that started to work with the embodiment we learn about in Zen and Aikido.
Because when you're doing Aikido or the different practices that are out there, it's like, oh, wow, everyone should do this. But people aren't all going to do Aikido, right? They're not all going to go into the dojo. In Zen's pretty rigorous, like to do a sesshin is not it's a physical endurance feat as much as anything. And most people just aren't going to do that. So this same question came up for me at university. It was like, wow, I really want people to benefit from this. And most people are never going to do this weird thing with hakamers and jumping around and ukemi and stuff, So it sounds like a similar process there.
Yeah, and I think part of what I want to define is what is something people will do. How can this kind of training reach them where they are? Maybe they don't want to make a full-blown commitment to Zen, but how can some sitting practice and breathing and working with the hara center, the lower abdomen that's so essential in the martial arts, how could that support leaders in their executive presence, in how they handle meetings, in how they face into conflict? How could it support people in their everyday work?
So sort of run us through some of the basic tools then. You mentioned a couple of those. So for someone that didn't know the terms hara or aikido or anything like that, what would be some of the sort of your basic embodied leadership tools?
Well, I describe it in terms of a Zen toolkit in the book I'm writing now on Resonate. But it starts with breath, one breath, and how you can use breath to be one with each thing you're doing, from drinking coffee to holding a meeting. How can you be one with and use your breath to create a unity? Seeing two sides, being able to always work with the two sides in a dualistic world and look at the greater truth that unites them, so that this could be so helpful. You think about our political realms. We need
this right now, don't we, Ginny? This is
oh my gosh.
Just did a Facebook post on this 2 days ago. It's like, it's easy to say climate change is going to kill us or climate change doesn't exist, but how do you go, where do those two views come from, even if one's more correct? Or the political left and the right in the States are just getting, like the Democrat Party is starting to look like a communist party, and Trump, less said the better. And they've got further and further apart, haven't they? And it's like, what unifies those two?
So what in being able to work with two sides, leaders who can work with that start to unify those two. And as you rightly point out, that is not our political climate today. It's almost like we get, the parties have long figured out they make more money by polarizing the two. Right. But a good leader brings people together. It's always easy to make people roll downhill to their greatest fears. It's hard to bring people up. But that's what a good leader does, bring people up. The third set of tools are the three centers that we can work with: the hara, the heart, the head. Being able to work with the integration of those centers in how we can be more present, more open and available, more sensing of people, more able to literally vibrate with what's going on, that we're able to work with that energy. And finally, my friends, the 4 energy patterns, which you also know well, but from
love it.
So these become practical tools that leaders can use every day.
I want to just talk a little bit. I know it's not your main focus right now, but the Phoebe, these what you call energy patterns, I see it as a preference model. This really inspired me in my own work. I work with 4 elements, which has a lot of similarities, a couple of differences. But I still, it's still required reading on our EFC, body facilitator course for students to understand how different we're not. Like, I'm not a broken Ginny, you're not a broken Mark, right? Like we have different personalities, different embodiments, and working to leverage those effectively to understand ourselves, others, and to design teams is just such an upgrade. Having some sort of preference system or typology is so important for any embodiment teacher out there, whether they're a yoga teacher or a aikido teacher or whatever. People see things differently, they learn differently, they get motivated differently. Like this is vital to have some sort of a map for that.
It is good to have a map, and I say that's the first level at which I also make use of the patterns, is to help people understand their habits, their natural preferences. I see great value in not stopping there, though, and I just speak to this from my own life, in that the kind of balance and sustainability that lets us really live with a kind of resilience comes from when we're able to shift between the patterns. So it's not about not using our preferences, just like you and I have a preference for handedness. We're still going to prefer writing with a certain hand or picking up the fork with a certain hand. And yet we always use both hands, and we know when we have to use the other one, right? So same with the energy patterns. And what I've become so much more aware of is how each pattern focuses energy differently. And that to be able to not only recognize my favorite or my tendencies, but be able to access the others, gets rid of blind spots or dead zones in our resonance. We're able to resonate with a broader range of circumstances.
I think this is the advantage of any embodied typology. There's three advantages. One is we can empathize, felt sense through people who have a different preference. The second one is we can actually shift in the moment. So rather than being, people be like, oh, I'm an ENTJ or whatever, it's like, no, we can actually use this as a toolkit. We can say, like, how can I be more fiery right now? How can I be more driver right now in your language? And it's like, you give like little simple embodied things to help people do that in a couple of your books, actually. And then, of course, over time, how do we develop our own range as our own more, to have a more flexible embodiment generally? So it's not just a little tool, it's not a trick, we're actually rounding out our personality. And like you said, you still have a preference, but we become more balanced as human beings.
That's right.
Have I understood the gist of your work, Ginny? I've been reading that book for about 10 years. So I want to make sure I sort of got it, because I'm passing on something not the same but similar.
Well, let me add another chapter to it. Each of the patterns vibrates at a different frequency. Just like you could think of as colors. Colors have a different frequency, and they vibrate at a different part of the human body in an embodied sense. So to contrast it for people, the visionary or the air element, that is the highest frequency, and it's a much more up in our head kind of thing. If it's associated with a chakra, we'd put it with the seventh chakra. It's this kind of the big, antenna dish that's plugged into the universe, right? Great for ideation, but not so much for getting stuff done. To get stuff done, that energy has to descend. It has to manifest through the other patterns, which kick in at lower frequencies, all the way down to the hara-centered patterns of driver and collaborator. So to be able to work with the whole body from this frequency point of view is also really helpful to understand when you have to drop your frequency into a different zone.
And this is the turn your work has taken, hasn't it, towards looking at resonance, frequency. Maybe say a little bit more about this. I think it's probably going to be our main topic today.
Being able to look at the human body as a resonant instrument, as a musical instrument, which you are, which I am, which every person listening to this podcast is. We are the instrument that shows up as a leader, that shows up as a teammate, as a spouse, as a lover. I mean, we are that instrument. And so there's certain ways that our body will naturally vibrate. Where this becomes so crucial is that the way we make our difference, or the way we make things happen, is through creating sympathetic vibration with other people and with the situations around us. And once we're kind of plugged into that as that underlying principle to change, we can start to use ourselves as a more effective instrument.
And do you mean this? Are you using this as a metaphor? For example, mirroring your own mediated mimicry or something? Or do you mean it literally, like the sort of heart math people talk about electric resonance, and there's there's quite a long tradition of kind of people talking about the vibrations, man, you know, the good vibes, the vibrations, and we're not on the same wavelength. It's sort of common sense language, but it's also kind of hippie language. And there's a way in which it sort of makes sense to people as a metaphor, doesn't it? Like my mum or sister would say, oh, we're not really on the same wavelength as a metaphor. But I'm not sure about some of the literal sort of science behind this either. Like I'm a bit dubious of some of the science. So where do you sit on the sort of literal to metaphorical scale here?
I start with the science. As I said, I'm a physicist by training. Yes. I'm a physicist. I can't help it. And, you know, part of what you learn in physics, especially particle physics, which was the branch of physics, I worked in a lab for 4 years in high energy physics. What you learn is that resonance is behind the creation of form, that everything is matter and everything is energy. Even matter is a condensed form of energy, and everything has a vibrational frequency. In fact, the mass of a particle is related to the frequency at which it vibrates. So this idea that everything's in vibration it's not available to us. It doesn't look that way. As you and I sit and have this conversation, we look around the room that we're sitting in, we don't physically see everything vibrating, but it is. It is vibrating. And from the smallest particle to the greatest things we create, there are certain natural frequencies at which it will move. And the human being is no exception. We also have natural vibratory frequencies, and you hear it in the human voice. I mean, I'm speaking at a certain frequency. This is not a metaphor. This is incredibly literal. Uh-huh. And if you see a great big Darth Vader kind of body, they'd have a different resonant frequency than a quick, short-lived body, right? There's a different... You and I have experienced on the aikido mat how different bodies physically move at different rates. Uh-huh. You can't approach each person with a formula because they're not responsive to the same frequencies. You have to blend or join at a frequency that person can move. This is a visceral experience.
Yeah.
And it's a human experience, but it's not confined to the human world. If you take two grandfather clocks and you put them next to each other, they will tend to sync up their vibrations.
Yeah.
Why? Because it's a more stable, energetic state.
Yeah.
You do away with the friction. You know, it's just like you and I have a much more connected conversation when we, quote, are on the same wavelength, rather than if you're talking about, you know, the moon and I'm talking about Saturn, you know, so we're talking about grasshoppers.
Talking, right? How we're talking. And if listeners to the podcast are smart, they'll hear this with guests that I try and get into a similar wavelength. You know, I'm using it all metaphorically as guests, because otherwise the interview just doesn't work, right? It's like good conversation, good sex, good aikido, good dancing, whatever. There has to be some syncing. I'm still slightly dubious about the move from the micro to the macro in some of the science you've talked about. I think there is a metaphorical element here, but as a general principle, it does make sense to me.
Well, for me, there's still a metaphorical element because the science stops at a certain place. You know, that in particular, it's hard to go from objective science to subjective experience. Mm-hmm. There's a certain kind of, you know, it's hard to make that leap over that fence because we can say things like, as the Heart Math Institute people say, that positive emotions have a very perceptible and measurable impact on heart rate variability and the coherence of the coherence between heart signals and brain signals.
Yeah.
We can measure that. We can measure the electromagnetic field around Mark Walsh, and we can see it changes when you are in heart-brain coherence.
Uh-huh.
So those are all objective measures, but what's hard to say is if I think positive thoughts, does it cause all that? You know, when I add the subjective measure, is it causing, or is it the result of, or is it correlative, or you know, there's somewhere, and I think there's just a lot more we need to learn. For a lot of these studies have never looked at the impact of the hara, for example. They look at coherence between heart and brain, but they don't look at what happens when we start syncing that up with breath and hara. Mm-hmm. And I think there's a huge amplification effect that happens, but it hasn't been measured yet. So for me, it goes off into the metaphor realm when I start talking that way.
Just to translate hara for the people out there who aren't familiar with Japanese art, so belly, right? This sense of center or belly.
Yeah, the lower abdomen in particular, which we know to be a center of consciousness, 100 it was a billion nerve cells. It's an entire enteric nervous system, neural ganglia, center of movement. It's also the part of the nervous system that develops and matures earliest. So in a way, it's developing even before the ego. And that's very significant.
Yeah, in terms of that prime part of us, my belly was rumbling earlier, and I was going, okay, what's going on here? Like maybe it knows something that my brain doesn't yet. It's something deeper. So I think for most people, this basic idea of resonance makes a lot of sense. The idea, what are what's the so what here for leaders or for coaches who might be out there? What's the so what? Is it like hey, you want to be careful of your own resonance? You want to get on the same wavelengths as other people? What are some of the big so what's here?
You can change your resonance. That's the big so what for me. I mean, it's how marvelous. You're a musical instrument and you can tune yourself. You can train yourself to actually resonate with universal energy. You can resonate with, we say this all the time in Aikido. What is Aikido? It is the way of harmonizing universal energy. So what is this ki or this chi that we're talking about? Well, it's all the energy around us. It might be the energy of this particular attack, but it's also the energy that's in the room. It's the group you're talking to. It's the person you're coaching with. It's the condition you're facing in your social context. It's the political climate. It's the climate change. It's the dimensions that we don't even sense. I always love the physics around this, and we have a 10-dimensional universe of which you and I can roughly sense 3 or 4 dimensions. There's so much going on that doesn't actually register as a conscious diagnosable sense, but it's still energy and we still have access to it. So how do we work with all of this? We can tune ourselves to become more sensitive, to pick up more of it, to vibrate with more of it, and to be able to work more seamlessly, that is, with less internal resistance, so that it comes through our actions.
How do you do that? So let's give a real practical example. Someone's on Facebook, there's an argument going on. They feel like not very tuned in here. What do they do? Well,
it's funny. I can never tell other people what they what they should do on Facebook. That's not where I find my own center of gravity. What to do I guess a question I'd ask myself if I'm in any conversation where it's just not clicking or it's just not ready, is do I have any value to add here? Is there anything I can add of value here? If not, go do something else. Can I be of any help here? Is there anything that can be united here? Otherwise, the question you and I always face with our time is, how do we want to spend this precious life? How do we want to apply this energy? What is it that is ours to do? And when this sense of how we can feel into our purpose, not just life purpose with capital P, like we only have one of them, but a purpose in this meeting, or a purpose in this coaching conversation, or a purpose with this kid that I'm talking to, or a purpose with this conversation you and I are having. If we can work into that purpose and be able to resonate with that, then we're able to make, in that moment, our greatest difference. That's what we can do. So what gets in the way? I mean, here's where the training and the tuning comes in. We grow up through a life that embodies a great deal of habit. That's the truth of it. It embodies habit from the time we're born, and it didn't start out as a blank slate. It embodies trauma. It embodies habits from when we're completely egocentric, selfish little kids before we've even learned a whit of empathy. It's embodied habits from how we got through a childhood that probably had some pretty rugged and rough moments. And here you and I come to our adulthood, and it's like there's a lot of deadening in the circuits, which we experience as tension in the body, stuck points we may not have access to. And you see this all the time in people. Well, what that has the effect of is it dulls our resonance. We don't vibrate naturally or freely. It's like our strings are too tight. We're too tightly wound. We're wound up on some neurotic issue that we can't get over about whether we're good enough or loved enough or whatever enough, or some trauma that has seared its way into our embodied system. So many of the things that you work with, Mark, in helping people work with embodiment is working this kind of stuff out and how to face into it. And that's what my work now with Resonate is about, is how people can integrate, tune, and tame this physical body, that it can resonate as the full person you are.
I mean, it sounds like some of it there was just relax, to be able to get, and that's not as easy a thing as it sounds, right?
Like, well, let's follow that. I mean, that's exactly the point. Relax. So what do you do when you say relax?
Yeah, most people don't know how to do that. They'll be like, "Why? It's a terrible instruction generally, isn't it, when you hear it in a yoga class or whatever?"
Yeah. What you always see is people will drop some superficial tension out of their shoulders or their face. Yeah. But how deeply can you relax? That, when you train deeply in Zen or aikido, you start to realize that relaxation is an onion of many layers.
Yeah. I've noticed that if I'm sitting, like a layer will drop up after 10 minutes, and then after an hour, then after 3 days, like another layer that I didn't even know was there will drop off because tension's numbing, right? So it's like, there's like a letting go at these different levels. And most people might be able to relax a little bit. There's chronic tension maybe in their belly or armoring bands in their face. That's not something we can just do.
Exactly. And as you said, tension is numbing. Now think for just a moment about what that means. To be numb means you're not vibrating. It means you're not able to move with what is going on. Mm-hmm. It means there's some sensation that you cannot pick up. Mm-hmm. And the more numb we become, the more our world shrinks to a smaller and smaller set of energies we can work with.
So some more practical stuff then. So give, people listening to this, they're aikido teachers, yoga teachers, dance teachers, a lot of them have students who listen to this, and you like to resonate with your students is really helpful, right? To be able to kind of get on that same wavelength, or occasionally not to not get dragged into where all your students are as well. It's another tool here. Like, is there a case when not to resonate?
Well, resonance is a physical phenomenon. It's not a choice that you and I make. Oh, do I want to resonate or not resonate? I mean, we can choose to check out of something, and so I guess we can choose not to resonate. But it's sort of a natural thing that's going to go on as or at least it's like bringing two waves together. They're going to interfere or they're going to add up. They're going to cancel each other out or they're going to add up. But you can't bring two waves together and then expect them to have no effect on each other. So something is going to happen.
So that's right? The first thing, is acknowledging we are always impacting each other. We're empathizing, we're influencing. We can't not influence, right? Like, I have to give this example. You sit next to someone on the train and he's angry and you're calm. You either calm him down or he makes you angry, right? It's like, so one of the two things is going to happen there. Those waves are competing.
Exactly right. So it's going to happen. Then it becomes, what power do I have in this to make it happen in a way that is true to what I'm trying to do in the world? How can I use this to help people? How can I use this to realize a goal, a purpose, be useful in a conversation? You ask about practical things that students can do. When people are already training, whether it's in aikido or dance, they always have a way to start checking into the truth of things in their own bodies. And that's what I suggest anyone do, is start noticing how you're moving and the different frequencies at which you can move, or which ones feel tight or difficult. If you notice what you have to release in order to move more freely, what do you have to let go of to work with this particular person in the aikido class, or that particular music to move to, what has to change or shift in you? The more you can feel into those shifts, the more you start to peel that onion of relaxation we talked about earlier into deeper levels of being able to vibrate with.
What about kind of more challenging people? So, like, let me give a couple examples. Maybe it's the sort of conservative uncle who says things that you disagree with, who's kind of stiff in their general way of being. And, I'm used to being around quite a lot of open, soft, free-flowing hippies, And it's like when I meet someone, I'm like, okay, this is a different way of being. I need to interact. Or like the other day, there was a guy walking down the street who was very clearly a drug addict and was quite angry and was shouting at his dog. And this guy was really, the frequency there was really different. It was like people were just giving this guy a wide berth. It's not necessarily a frequency I'd want to interact with even, but sometimes I'd be forced to, right? Like if that guy was in my face, it'd be like, whoa, what can I do about this? So, yeah, like how do we interact with some people that maybe are at a different wavelength, as it were?
Well, your example is a great one. I mean, you saw how people, quote, give them a wide berth. That when we put out a repulsive signal, a signal that causes a great deal of agitation, other people pick up on it. And they are, as we said earlier, going to react to it. It's instinctive. It's brainstem kind of stuff. So it's yeah. If you see that kind of thing happening, giving a wide berth, or again, you always decide: is this mine to engage? That's always the choice that we make. Is this mine to engage? Now, every so often it is. I think of the story of a wonderful colleague of mine who's a physician, and some of her patients are in that really difficult place you described. They're really struggling. She had one story in particular where the guy had enormous back pain, and he was really angry at the world. He was angry at her because, boy, if she had just prescribed, the MRI or the whatever, some kind of treatment earlier when it would have been covered by his insurance, that would have been okay. In the States, we have a lot of these issues. So, so she knew when she was going into that engagement that she was going to confront a great deal of frustration and anger. And she actually checked herself at the door. I mean, and here's again a very basic practice, and she learned it from Zen leadership and heel training. She centered herself. I mean, any aikidoist knows this. She breathed deeply into her hara. She felt deeply into what she was about to go into, and decided to engage this person at a level of genuine dialogue, to really see him. And she met him where he was at. And started asking questions that wouldn't be common for a physician-patient exchange, but she started deepening into where he was. And as soon as they joined, he could shift. He shifted because she shifted and joined with him. So it was incredible, in a sense, generosity on her part. And yet she was also incredibly elevated by this experience, because as they came out of it, he came up with an idea about how he was a contractor, so he needed his back to work and he couldn't work without it. But he came up with an idea around how he could use his skill and knowledge in contracting to teach others, and a whole different angle that he wanted to take his business in. And they stayed in touch well after that exchange. So I offer this example to just say, sometimes by how we are in ourself, when we join with another person, we can help them move to a better place. That said, we can't change other people by saying, make them change. It always starts with an inner shift. It is our own willingness to engage. And it has to be, in some sense, on purpose for us. It has to, in some sense, match who we are and what we're about in the world.
So something interesting there I want to come back to about being generous. So often I find there's this moment when it's a conflict online or in person or whatever, and there's a moment of generosity where it's like, I need to find that energy, that courage, that heart to be the one who steps back first, rather than the sort of normal cycle of escalation, or the one who listens even when I disagree. Yeah. It's like, how do we find that generosity? Because sometimes I'm just not having a good day. I know all the techniques. Like, there's an aikido move, or I can do the okay, but I just can't find it in me. And then other days I can. Like I apologized to someone earlier who I'd just been a bit mean to a couple of days before. Just before this call, actually, I just happened to bump into them at a yoga class, and I apologized to them. And I just done a yoga class, so I was really well resourced. And they took it really well. And then it was like a little bit of healing. But it is that I needed to like go up to her. She could have come up to me and apologized too, right? You wasn't too nice to me either, but to be honest, I made that generosity of walking over to her and saying, hey, but then I was resourced, right? And I just done a yoga class the last hour. I was pretty in a good place. But it's like, how do we find that generosity?
Well, you gave your own answer, didn't you? You were resourced. And what does it mean to be resourced? It means feeling less separate and more whole.
Yeah.
Because the truth of our existence is we belong to one another. You know, there's one thing going on, but the fact that we feel is of each of us in our separate skin, each of us in our separate ego. And we know as the ego evolves, as it develops, as it matures, it keeps, in a sense, casting a broader net. A little kid doesn't understand empathy. They're going to be thinking totally about themselves and seeing everything through the lens of their own perspective. But as we mature, it's natural to start to learn how to empathize with others and read other signals and take their concerns into our account when we, quote, are resourced, you know, when we can be that big. You know, to me, that if, again, from a resonance point of view, the great benefit of those moments of generosity is we remember more of who we are.
That's a nice, I'd say it again, 'cause it's nice. So we remember more of who we are. It's like, this is the person not just I want to be, like aspirational ethics, but also this is the person I am. That person earlier who was mean to this person wasn't the person I really am. And people even say, don't they, like, I wasn't myself, you know? Like, I find this quite interesting.
Yeah, you know, it's, in a sense, goes back to that relaxation you spoke about. You know, that part of the resourcing or the relaxation is expanding into the wholeness of who we are, as opposed to the constriction or contraction that takes us into that separate egocentric being that we also are. I mean, that's also a truth of us. It's just not our greatest truth.
Right. This is not all who I am. This is a lesser or limited version, you know? Like an older, you know, like a childish version. We might say he's being childish or he's acting like an animal. This is like some sense that it's not our best self. So what else? Like resourcing seems to be underrated. You know, like I'm just such a nicer person when I'm happier and well slept and well fed and, you know, had done yoga that day and meditated in the morning. You know, I think that's so underrated. What else in terms of like remembering the kind of wholeness of who we are?
Well, the 3 stages that I have settled on and taking people through in the work that I'm doing now around Resonate is first integrating the head, the heart, the hara, so how we can use ourselves to feel that wholeness. It's hard to be resourced when we're cut off from our power. Mm-hmm. So part of it is that deep connection with the hara, which is the seat of power, and allowing energy to flow freely through the whole system. Because when energy flows freely, we feel resourced. We feel it. As opposed to when we get tight and we constrict, something gets cut off. And that's where problems assert themselves. The second part is tuning, and how we start to tune that instrument so that the strings aren't too tight, if you will. Literally, we're bringing it into tune. So what does that mean? We have to get tension out of the body. We have to, and we can use even the vibration of sound to help tune the human body. And the third part is taming that ego, taming the ego so that it can transcend itself and not steal our identity, not make us think that's all of who we are, but that we can actually feel into the self beyond the ego, the whole self.
Nice, very nice. And what's been a recent discovery? Because, you know, I've done a little workshop with you and I've been reading your books for a while, and we've had there's a couple of guest webinars and things like that. What's been a recent discovery for you in this new work?
Yeah, a good question, Mark. This work itself really grabbed me. And I think the discovery for me around Resonate or resonance is that it is the link between the inner and outer world. It is what links us inside, outside as one. And there is no separation. So it really hit me. You know, it came out of a conversation that we had at a Zen Leader program last winter, where we were talking about climate change. And Gordon Green Roshi was giving just an impassioned talk about why is this so darn difficult to get our, collective head and our collective actions around responding to climate change. And it got me thinking about how change happens. He had a line, he said, we have to change how change happens. And I thought, oh, it always happens through resonance. But how do we change how we resonate? And that's what started gnawing on me. And what I realized was that resonance is the linker between what's going on in the outer world and what's going on in the inner world. And how we vibrate is the connection. It's that simple, and it's that complex. So that's what has really hit me lately.
You seem to have developed the sound part of the work as well. I don't remember that being as big a part of the work. Which is like this sort of like different sounds, different centers, this kind of thing.
Yeah, I think I am doing a lot more work with sound these days. You know, the work with sound has always been a part of Zen training, and it's the saying of chants and things. And there can be a kind of a misconception, especially in the West, maybe even in the East, I don't know, that these chants are about saying our prayers, or how we kind of fit them into a Western model of what chanting is about. But in our line of Zen, it's very physical. It's about using the vibration of sound to open up cavities in the human body. And the O sound resonates a certain way, oo a certain way, ah, a, e, all open different parts of the human body. So by using these sounds, we can get the subtle vibration going on inside, even as we merge with a group on the outside in, say, the kind of Okyo training or chanting training we do in Zen. So yes, I'm doing a lot more work with sound and how even individually we can use sound to open ourselves up.
People haven't heard Zen chanting. It's quite something, isn't it? I don't know if you could give us a blast of it.
I'll give you a blast of it. Well, the features of Zen chanting that I have learned, first is that we use the original Sanskrit sounds because they are very heavy on vowel sounds that resonate within the cavities of the body. E is in the throat, A, A, O, U. So U, O as you work your way down. So O is at the base, U, A, E, working up. So these basic sounds will start to vibrate these different parts of the body. And then there's a kind of intensity to the way of chanting in Zen, where each syllable is given equal weight, which is not the way we normally speak. Like you can hear even in my inflection, I give certain syllables more weight than other syllables. You do the same. But in the chanting, each one's given equal weight. So it comes out something like this. Namu samanda moto nano hara che koto shasono nanto jeto and ga. So there's a pop, 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 pop.
Like an insistent quality sometimes to it, isn't there?
Insistent quality. But each sound I'm sending down into my own center, as opposed to going,
dame parasam. There's like this kind of deep belly resonance to it sometimes, which is quite gorgeous.
Well, in fact, that's part of the training, that rather than projecting out and say, Namu Samanda, kind of sending the sound out, I'm sending it down. So the instrument I'm hitting is my own hara. Namu Samanda Moto Nano Hara Chikotosha. And in fact, the group rhythm for chanting is kept by hitting a drum called a mokugyo. And that is the same rhythm that we use hitting our own hara with each syllable.
And it's kind of late here. I think I could do it a Zen wake-up call as well. Like I remember when I was sitting with you once early in the morning, I think it was a very pleasant location, and I was sitting quite close to you. I don't know if I'd been given some sort of seat of honor quite near you. And then people were drifting off a little bit. And then you gave this terrifying Zen scream, and it kind of shocked everyone awake.
But as I would tell people, so what was the effect it had in your body? And well, it was a zing. Well, that's sort of the point.
I felt like I had 2 espressos instantaneously. I almost swore out loud. I almost went, "Fucking hell, Ginny!" Like I was such a shock. I think I was sitting a bit close to you, and maybe I didn't need it as much as some, but it was a proper, there's a real hit of vocal energy.
Well, it goes back to, though, what's the point? What's the so what in this? Because finding our voice is no small thing. It relates to that just relax that we were talking about earlier. But voice is related to our creative expression in the world. It's related to how we show up and communicate with human beings, how we express ourselves, how we are tuned in to communication with other people. All of those things are tied into voice. So, in the fifth chakra, in the yogic sense of things. So how we work this has a lot to do with clarifying what is our song to sing.
Lovely. And we need to move towards wrap up relatively soon. Are there any other sort of main pieces of the book that we haven't covered? Or obviously it's not, it's not the same as the whole thing, but is there any other sort of big chunks we're missing out here?
Well, the book resonated, and thank you for asking it, but it really addresses three questions. First, how resonance underlies all change, why this matters so much. Second, how you and I can become more resonant beings, how we can tune and tame and integrate ourselves. And third, how we can apply this in making our difference in our relationships, in our goals, on our teams, in even large-scale social change, how we can use this to make our difference. So it's a very practical book. It's also grounded in the science of resonance. So and the practices that I have learned through Zen, through aikido, that help us tune this physical body.
Nice. And as I understand it, there's a special website called publishizer.com, right? And that's publishizer spelt the American way with a Z.com/resonate. And this is, it's kind of an interesting model, isn't it, for a book that you have to get enough pre-orders and then it goes to a publisher or something like this. So I'm kind of curious where you went with that, because you've had several books published. It's not like you had to. I mean, you just like that model?
Well, I thought it was a good way to test the resonance of this whole idea and get people interested in it. And it's also a model that builds interest. Usually when we write books, we end up publicizing them after the book comes out, and then we go around and try to get people to buy them. This is a pre-order campaign. The book won't be ready until, I imagine, early 2020, but that will depend on its publishing scenario, what happens after the pre-order campaign. But just in this month of August, the campaign is open. So by August 30th, we need as many pre-orders as possible. That's what will draw attention to the book. That's what will get more publisher interest and give the most options for where the book goes from there.
Great. So we'll get this out as quick as possible.
Oh, thank you.
And I just want to encourage people, as I said, like literally, I don't say it's about every guest, but I've got several books. Look, right here on my shelf. There's the Zen Leader right there. You can see that. And the other one's at EFC, because we keep a copy at EFC of Moves to Greatness. So encourage. I'd love to see this. I'd love to see this out there. And then your main site is the Institute of Zen Leadership.org. Is that right?
No oven there, just institutezenleadership.org.
There we go. Institutezenleadership.org.
Yeah, thank you.
Anything else you want to tell people about while we're here?
Oh, thank you. What I would say is, whatever you're training in, deepen yourself into how you can start to use it to become more sensitive. Being sensitive means we're vibrating with how you can become more relaxed and how you can become bigger in terms of what you're able to do and give in the world. It is the way. It is the way. So I encourage people to find those ways in their training. If you want to come train in Zen Leadership, the Institute for Zen Leadership is available to you. And the book Resonate is my latest best effort to make this all distillable down into practices we can do every day.
Ginny, thank you so much for joining us today. Always a pleasure.
Thank you, Mark. My pleasure was mine.
Some ways to get more, to give back, and to get more involved now. So the biggest request I have would be to share the podcast with your friends, people that you think would really enjoy it. Email it to them, put it on your social media, tell them about it, old school. Really appreciate that. Equally, if you want to support us financially, you can go to Patreon. That's patreon.com/embodiment podcast and give us $1 an episode. And I'd say they're well worth $1. So that's less less than £1 if you're in UK-ish. So yeah, please go there. On the embodifacilitator.com website is where this is hosted. If most people I think listen to for iTunes. iTunes, we'd certainly appreciate a review. The way iTunes works means that a review means more people will find it. iTunes regards it as more important for searches. So even a couple of sentences review really does help as a little thank you to us. And if you want to go to embodifacilitator.com, you can see the actual, links to the sites. There's comments on there. The Facebook group tends to be where people discuss things. So if you go to put in the Embodiment podcast into Facebook, there's a page which is relatively quiet and a group which does have some discussion on. So I will reply to things personally there. So also on the embodifacilitator.com website, there's all sorts of freebies there. There's videos, there's free ebooks, there's ebooks you can buy. And of course, there's our newsletter list. If you want to stay in touch and learn about things like the Embodied Facilitator course and our next Embodied Yoga Principles teacher training, then go to that website and you'll see a little pop-up and you can get the newsletter through there. Okay, so I think they're the main ones. Tell your friends, pay us some money on Patreon, give us a review on iTunes, send us your email if you want to be on the newsletter list, and get involved on the Facebook there. Bit long. Pick whatever you like that works for you. Until next time, welcome home to the body.